everyone, it's Evelyn, and this is Reppin. I know how valuable your time is and just how many options you have. So thank you. I'm so glad you're here. This is the third and final installment of my exclusive Tribeca Film Festival series, and it's a good one. In K-pop, most artists are scouted young. Then they're pushed through a rigorous training system. Then they're assembled into polished, performance-ready groups. But the Rose, which is a Korean indie rock band that took the world by storm, did exactly the opposite. These four young men came together not through a label or agency, but through friendship. They chose each other, and they chose music. They started by busking, playing in city streets and parks. No stage, just raw talent and heart. Their debut single, Sorry, went viral, racking up over 60 million views, catapulting them into global stardom. But just as their career was taking off, a legal battle forced a 3-year hiatus. Then the Korean members entered a mandatory military service. So the band was really tested by distance, pressure, and mental health challenges. But they came back, stronger, independent, unfiltered, and still standing by the values they believe in and with their integrity fully intact. The Rose, Come Back to Me is a powerful all-access documentary about chasing dreams, breaking molds, and doing it all on your own terms. Join me as I sit down with the film's director, Eugene, and Academy Award-nominated producer, Diane Quon. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. And congratulations on this incredible film, The Rose, Come Back to Me. I have gotten into the whole K-drama, K-pop thing in the last few years. I'm a late bloomer here. And I'm so excited to see this story because I think for me, this film, it's not just about The Rose, which is an incredible band, but it really was an inspiring look about friendship, a strength in character, which, you know, that's a whole nother series right there. And having the guts to be true to who you are. When you were making this film, were those some of the touch points that you knew going in? Or was that something you sort of discovered and continued to harvest during production?
I think for me, the theme of pursuing your dream and being true to yourself, that was pretty clear to me from the beginning, that the whole idea that they dropped out of the K-pop training system because it didn't work for them, that already showed me that they were strong enough and believed in themselves enough that they were going to, even if it's harder, to pursue the dream that was their dream versus somebody else's dream. The friendship and their strength, until we filmed them more and experienced their friendship, that was something I grew to really see and respect. The following our own dreams, that probably was what drew me to the story in the first place. I love the idea of young people because I will always be thankful to my parents. I'm from a different generation who, you know, where you're taught to be a doctor, lawyer, which is fine too. It's good, but it just wasn't me. And even being, you know, getting criticism from their friends and things like that, they supported letting me pursue my dream. Yeah, so I love this idea.
How about you, Eugene?
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea of them really choosing their own path and trying to carve out their own destiny was something that really appealed to me early on as well. I mean, just to say a little bit more about kind of the K-pop piece of it, it's interesting to see how, you know, in general, they do just get categorized as K-pop despite the fact that they are a rock thing. And I think that's kind of part of just them being independent outside the system, but really still trying to make their own lane. Like, it sort of points to how hard it is to break out of certain boxes. Also, just their dedication and their perseverance, how committed they are to really making their own paths and just really defining their music and their career and their band on their own. And I think the friendship part, similar to Diane, I think really was sort of once we got to know their story a bit more and to know them a bit their dynamic really started to come through and the roles that they play.
Here's the thing that I also loved. I mean, again, there was such a sense of commitment to each other, their families, the fans, the craft of music. And again, I go back to having the guts to be true to who you are, because it does take a lot of courage, especially in this climate, to really be authentic and to show up for your beliefs. And when the Rose, they're young Korean kids that started essentially busking, right? And then they formed a band. They came together on their own when in the most general terms, there is an agency that sort of, for lack of a better word, because my caffeine is leaving my body right now, manufacturing groups, like putting specific people together. And they kind of chose one another as their family, to be their family and to be there for each other. Despite, I'm sure, many hardships that we didn't even get into in the film, they stayed true to that friendship and they made mistakes. But I also love that they broke every barrier. Diane, you were quoted as saying, "What does it take to break out and not be put in a box as being an Asian band?" I want to take that one step further, because they broke the barriers in many ways. Eugene, you said they are not just a K-pop band. They're essentially a rock band, right? So they break barriers there. Suing the record label because they didn't get what they were truly supposed to get was going against the grain. But in many ways, this parallels Eugene, your personal story, from what I understand, and Diane, your personal story. Eugene, you started in neuroscience and you became a filmmaker? Talk me through that in terms of breaking boxes. And Diane, you were an executive for NBC and Paramount in marketing, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to start documentary producing in 2016, and then you became this award-winning producer. You guys, stepped out and made your own way. But yeah, Eugene, let's start with you first. Like neuroscience to filmmaker, how did that go?
Oh, yeah. My parents have probably forgiven me. But they're very supportive nonetheless, and sort of proud of films as they've come out. They've seen sort of like the kinds of projects that I've tried to work on and come to appreciate that. My mother was actually cinephile growing up. She sort of grew up in downtown Seoul, very close to the main movie theater there. Sometimes like her family wouldn't know where she was at night, and she'd be like asleep on the couch of the movie theater, because she just spent all day watching Yul Brynner films. But for me, like, it's very kind of you to say it, to frame it as breaking boxes, or breaking out of certain norms. But it was very much more shambolic, improvisational as I was going through it. I've always loved filmmaking. I've always loved writing. I've always loved consuming any art that makes me laugh and it makes me think. And I think as I was growing up, it was always this question of, would I kind of try and make storytelling and filmmaking like my job or sort of my side job? Needless to say, my parents had an opinion about which one it should be.
I'm still in therapy from my talk with my parents, so we can talk about that later.
Oh, if you have a good therapist, please share.
Group rate.
I did graduate with a degree in neuroscience, but I was making films on the side and writing plays and trying to find my voice creatively. When I think back on it now, it really is kind of two different modes of finding truth. Science is certainly one way to sort of search for truth and look for ways to sort of find verifiable facts through repetition and whatnot. But art presents another kind of truth as well. And I think it was always this sort of question of, how I would find that way to balance the two sides of it. After a few years working in the neurosciences, I decided to make the leap and come to this side, come to the dark side.
Definitely a leap. How about you, Diane? I mean, you sort of transcended a lot of industry roles, which that in itself is difficult.
Yeah, I would say all my life too, I enjoy the arts. I took dance, ballet, all those kind of lessons. And my parents, especially my dad, they owned a restaurant, but he would take time to bring me to like musicals and to shows. And my dream was like to be in a musical one day. But the problem was I wasn't talented. So I had to pursue like something different. And my major was econ, actually.
Oh my God.
So then it was like, what do I do with the econ major? And I went to LA to get my MBA. And that's when I thought, well, this is the time I'm going to try the entertainment industry is to write to whoever I could and get a job in LA in the entertainment industry. And I was lucky. I got interest at NBC, and then they hired me, and then I got a job at Paramount as in marketing and eventually vice president marketing. And I really, really loved it. But in my heart, I still always thought, oh, I'd love to make my own films. I had to market so many back ones. On Friday the 13th, number 8, I'm going like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. What do you think? No.
Oh, mine was Jason Takes Manhattan. That was my favorite one. I think that was part 85.
Oh, yeah. So I'm glad some people appreciated our films. But I was like, one day I would like to do this. And then eventually I also got married and had 4 kids and moved back to Chicago. And when my kids were older, that's when I thought, well, when I can maybe pursue my dream of producing. And, Eugene knows the story, but I share it because it's so much of who I am. But I lost my son when he was 22 years old.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And it was changed my life, of course, like forever. And thinking about producing was not even top of mind anymore. And then a few years later, one of my good friends brought me to Sundance because she knew my dream had been like to make my own films and invited me to get me out of the house. And that's when I saw docs really for the first time in a different light and saw like, wow, you can make a doc about something really important, but it can be entertaining. And it's like what we talked earlier. It's like you can put a message, hide kind of the message in the entertainment, and that docs, you could actually change folks in the way of how they think of a topic. So that's when I went home and decided, okay, I'm going to try. Maybe this is what I could do. Honor my son. And I was lucky to hook up with Cartemplin Film in Chicago. And that's when I met Bing. And we worked on, that was my first film, Minding the Gap, which ended up doing really well. And I saw the impact that a film can make, and especially among young people. It's very much like Rose, too, in Matt is Out again about young people coming of age, trying to find themselves. And so I've been lucky to work with a lot of the directors like Eugene and pursue this, this idea. And my parents were very supportive, although confused. And then the one thing I would have to say why I'm grateful for Mind the Gap was they don't understand the entertainment industry, but something they did understand was the Academy Awards. And so when my aunt said, she's going to the Academy Awards, then they were like, oh, then this must be good. So I'm glad that they got to see that before they passed away. Because I always be grateful that they supported me.
That's really amazing. I don't think anyone outside of the immigrant specifically, I can only speak to my experience, the Asian immigrant experience, is you really feel the full weight of that expectation, and then when you break it to say you want to be a storyteller, they're kind of like, what? So, but I have to say, I'm grateful that you guys, I really do think that you guys have broken many boxes. And I really think The Rose is a film that's not just about adolescence. This is my own personal experience after watching it. One of the most wonderful things, and there were many wonderful things about this film, was that it reminded you what it could be like if everyone could stand up and truly root themselves behind things that they believe in. There's one moment, and I don't think I'm going to be doing a spoiler alert, or hopefully not, that they wanted to get, obviously, signed to a major record label. They did. And then, when the record label essentially took advantage of them in many ways, they were like, yeah, no. And then to risk that and say, I'm going to fight for each other because, I think the record company was trying to pit one against the other. And, I kind of likened it to like the real life Friends version, and Courtney Cox was like, this is where we're all getting paid. We're getting paid together the same amount. And wouldn't it be great if we could all champion each other? And I think that was such a beautiful reminder of what strength and character looks like Was there a moment for you in the film that resonated with your personal story that also maybe inspired you?
I think I was actually really inspired by the team that brought this film together because, like documentary filmmaking is hard. Indie documentary filmmaking is hard. So, I mean, and none of this would have been possible without Diane and just sort of how amazing she is just to put this film together in really such a short amount of time for an independent documentary. It's just almost unheard of. But there's just so many sacrifices that people made to make that possible. I mean, just time and money, of course, but different stages had different people who were just contributing so much. Like, Rich, Hama, and Soyeon, both co-producers, Rich is the DP, them running around and just being able to capture so much during production. Diane, just everything that she put in, just grinding and grinding and grinding to get everything together. It just made me feel, honestly, very inspired by their sacrifices and wanted to make sure that I held up my end of the bargain. But I mean, I think we've all been in situations where the teamwork worked, and sometimes, sometimes the teamwork and the dynamic get a little bit tricky. And I think just the way that Diane built this team and the way that it all came together was something that I really sort of, just gained a tremendous amount of inspiration, strength, and wanting to really, hold up the end of the market and make sure the teamwork made the dream work.
It's a beautiful film. What about you, Diane? Was there a moment in the film that you sort of can connect with and really resonated?
Well, I agree totally with Eugene about how this team has inspired me to, making it was so hard, but I was committed to finishing it because how many people gave to this to make it work. But it also showed me how much they also believe in the Rose's story. Made me think, okay, this is the story that we need to tell because all these other folks are willing their butts off, to make this happen, including Eugene and our all the post team too. Anita put countless hours in, and Tammy, our archival producer. Just a lot of people, including our funders, many who aren't Asian, but just believed in the story. I think another thing that really inspired me in terms of the band itself was their willingness to talk about, and I brought this up a lot when I talked to our funders, why the film was important to me was the idea of healing and how they're using their music to heal, and their willingness to talk about mental health. For Jeff to talk about depression, which is such a no anywhere in the world, much less Korea. That really inspired me. To talk about hard things like that, and especially when you're known.
Yeah, I was just going to go to that because I think, mental health, regardless of where you are in the world, there's still such a stigmatization that is alive and well, unfortunately, but that's certainly true in the Asian community. You don't go to therapy. You don't talk about it, right? You just kind of sweep it on the rug and, keep a happy face. He was so beautifully vulnerable. And he's a guy, not to be completely sexist, but let's face it, there is a double standard, right? So here he is, a Korean young man talking about depression and truly being emotional about it. What kind of conversations did you want to start? Because I think this film really opens the door for many conversations. So as a storyteller, as a director, Eugene, as a producer, Diane, what kind of conversations do you want to start with in this film?
We've touched upon a lot of the themes that I think we had been talking, Diane, the rest of the team, as we were making the film. But I think part of the joy of bringing the film out into the world is the conversations that you don't expect or that surprise. And actually, one of the topics that came up was from one of the supporters of the film, who came on later on, who's also Asian American. We talked about masculinity, actually. So it comes to mind because you mentioned it. Jeff is tremendously open. I mean, all the guys are really open about what they've gone through, but they're rock stars. They're badasses. They're on the stage and they're just selling out shows and touring the world. And I think at a time when there are so many contested visions of what masculinity should be, and so many conversations about how young men should be, there's something to that to show that sensitivity and vulnerability are not the opposite being a man. It's part of it. It can live comfortably. Vulnerability is a kind of strength. It can live comfortably next to other more traditional and external visions and versions of strength. It was interesting to hear that come up because I think that's not really something that I thought about, but it's one of those ways that I think you're fortunate enough to sort of be part of a team like this, as I was, and put something out into the world. It's like, oh, wow, like there's so many ways to look at this. And it really does sort of go out part of a bigger conversation than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, I agree. Diane, how about you?
Something that was always important to me in this film too was the idea of like showing that this is a band, a very talented band, that's good looking and talented. And if you close your eyes and listen to them, you don't necessarily say, oh, they're a Korean band or they're this kind of band or put them in a box based on how they look, but just enjoy their music. And something that I could always be was whenever I looked at the Grammys, unless it was a K-pop group, which is great too, you really didn't see though Asian performers.
Never.
And I could say, are we just not talented? Are there Asian musicians? Why are we on the Grammys? Where are they? And I was hoping that through this film that people could recognize and not put them in a box, but just to say, this is a talented band. Can they reach number one on Billboard? Are we still in that same place where we can't break out of that box? So hopefully that is a conversation. But that's how I hope people think of them, just as another talented group. And they also happen to be Asian, and we're proud of that. But also can we see that they're talented for their talents, not put them in a box.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I loved, there's so many things that I loved about this film, is that there are so many universal messages that need to be explored and had. And it has nothing to do with them, whether or not they're Korean or not. They just happen to be a Korean kick-ass band, and I just loved that, that was the headline of the thing. There's so much more powerful, purposeful themes in this that is so applicable to almost every human being, on the spectrum, about authenticity, about, loving your friends and honoring them and not betraying them. And again, strength in character. I know you've made a ton of other films. I mean, Eugene, you've done a bunch of other films with marginalized voices. Diane, you and I talked about, I had David Siv on my show who did Bad Acts and had a lot of stories, again, that were, yes, for marginalized communities. And yes, some films were specific with their ethnicities and backgrounds. There's such a buzzword about like marginalized communities, underrepresented voices. We got to get these things. For people who still don't get it, like, why is that important to have these perspective and stories out there, and the storytellers and creatives? You guys are still fighting the good fight. I mean, Diane, you and I were just talking. It's hard, man. It's hard creating on a good day, and the world is kind of chaotic right now, and it's much more challenging. So as storytellers, why is it important for you to still be the champion to telling these stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks sort of how you started the question because of what's universal, Right? You can look like the Rose, you can look like we look on this call, but there are things we go to that anybody can relate to. And it's just a question of being able to connect like the specificity of our identity with what is broader and universal. I can't think of a more powerful tool for that than storytelling, especially in this day and age when all of our stories are being threatened. I mean, marginalized. The stories of marginalized voices themselves are getting marginalized. I mean, like there are narratives that are being put out there, and it's a reminder kind of how constant we have to be in terms of continuing to get our stories out there, and how we just have to keep taking up space and demanding that our stories be seen. And just understanding that if someone just listen and sit through a film, listen to a song, they'll just see that there's just so much more that there is to connect over and there is to fight over.
Right. Diane, do you have anything to add?
People tend to think we're different and this is different. And, each group is so different. And I think through our stories, you'll see this specialness in our stories, but also at the same time, realize, oh, we are more same than different in many ways. And also to hopefully create empathy. It's easy to just right away say, oh, they're bad people. Like I think about that a lot from Minding Gap, where it's about 3 guys who experience trauma in home. And it's easy when one of them starts to be a bit abusive on his own, just to villainize him, but then to understand his background, where he came from and how he's trying to change. My hope was that it helps people just be less judgmental and instead to understand this is where the problems started and this is why we needed to stop instead of just villainizing the person. So I really hope these films create empathy and understanding of people who may look different or they were brought up differently and see, like Eugene said, this universal messages apply to us all and see there's more, commonalities and differences. Especially now in the country where we talk so much about the emphasis on the differences versus this. And
when we were growing up, all of us, we didn't, I don't know about you, but I didn't have any Asian representation. So what do you think a younger version of you would react if you had a film like this featuring these gorgeous Asian rock badasses? How do you think it would have impacted you if you did you have something like this? Through the course of this podcast, it really made me understand a lot of my own personal experiences. And I think the lack of representation not only made me not have a community, it really impacted my self-perception. Now there's these gorgeous Asian stories that are modern and sophisticated. And I'm like, oh, so kids now will grow up with a better sense of self. Because the only thing I saw was Planet on the Apes, talking monkeys in a live action. So what does that say about me?
When we interviewed the various folks for the film, for the Rose film, he is featured in our film, Daniel Lee, who was their agent, who books the band, including Coachella and the Forum. And what we don't show in the film is him talking about how having bands like K-pop finally made him feel like, oh, we are good. To your point, we are good looking. We are talented. And he sees it he said so much in his nephews, his younger nephews, who walk into a room and aren't ashamed of how they look and not afraid to go out in the world because they just feel proud of themselves now. Now they're cool. They're not the nerd, this stereotype that we've heard about. Films, fiction, and docs have really helped, hopefully, young people to feel better about themselves, to feel like we have a place here. It's funny because still, when I worked at Paramount, people kept calling me Nancy because Nancy Quon is the one actress that people knew from Flower Drum Song, I would think it was. But that's just to show you how limited the roles were. That was the one woman, that people thought of as Asian. And then they would keep calling me Nancy. It just was an example to me of how we need more representation out there in film. So it's not like this exotic thing to be.
How about you, Eugene?
So many thoughts based on everything that you all have said. I think one of the things that stood out to me from starting to work on this film was that there's a lot of Korean guys from LA. This project. I joke sometimes because I spent some time in New York and New Jersey as well. I sometimes joke that it's the closest I can relate it to. It's like being Italian from New York. There's just a thing that's about being Korean from LA. That's just that's so specific to being Korean and being from LA. A lot of those guys are people who are roughly my age and kind of have this same question of just wanting to make art, but how to do it as someone who's Korean from LA. Because I'll say growing up, we were still, we're in Los Angeles, presumably a tremendously diverse place. But in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was we were just so hungry for anything. I think my first role models were actually from an anime called Bubblegum Crisis. and they were women, but they were in Japan and they're like, are in a rock band by day, but then like wear mecha suits and fight androids at night. Yeah. I mean, it's like Gem and the Holograms, but like in Japan. But yeah, but that's where I was finding my sense of connection, because there was just nothing as like a young Asian American growing up to connect to in the mainstream media. What I'm grateful to see is like some of the same phenomena that you all are talking about. My nieces, my nephews, they don't have the same baggage that I do. And I'm so grateful for that, because I still have that thing. I still don't like catching myself in mirrors. I still sort of like see myself like, oh wait, yeah, I'm one of those. That's inside me deeply in a way that like I just sort of wish I could get rid of, but I know is also so central to who I am.
Yeah, I get that.
What I appreciate also about just the increase in representation is I think it allows our communities to have our conversations and different views of how to be one of us as well. There's no one way to be a Korean American, an Asian American, an ANHPI American. We can exist in all three dimensions. We can be flawed. We can be badasses. We can be all these things. And we don't have to just rely on a handful of white representation. We can see sort of the galaxy of human experience represented in a way where we can see what resonates with us that actually, sort of contradictorily goes past like the fact that it just looks like us. It's just like, this person looks like me. And they're super into, hardcore punk rock from like 1979 to 19 or whatever. You can drill down in a way that makes it so that you can really just find layers to yourself.
Yeah, it goes deep, doesn't it? Look, representation has always needed a lot of work in the most literal sense in terms of like skin color and gender and, ethnicities. And that's certainly, at a kind of inflection point. And I think we need to keep pushing forward. I just love this movie, how universal it is. In terms of the stories that you want to continue to tell and champion, what's the big lesson that you want audiences to walk away from when they see The Rose? Because for me, it reminds me to really stay true and take the risks, however high those stakes could be, to stay true to me. Because I think for them, it's paying off. They're so human. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They owned it. They're still creating music. They picked each other. It's like, make the life you want, but also be ready to take the risks. So for you, what is it? What's that one takeaway that you guys want people to have as storytellers?
I think for Rose specifically, what you just said about staying true to yourself is the message I'd love for people to come away with. And I think for me, even when I think about storytelling and what's coming up and stories I'm going to tell in the future, the temptation is to do the films that the market is saying that is what people want only, that the big streamers are only buying certain kind of projects, like huge celebrities or true crime or like just weird stuff that people want to watch because it's so weird. It's just like the temptation of, okay, how do I find stories just like that? But try to be true to myself about why I went into this in the first place is remind myself, do I really want to do that? How can I still tell the stories that matter and can hopefully make a difference? It sounds so cheesy, but to really make a difference and leave that behind, these kind of films that I can be proud of. It's funny when we were thinking of a title for The Rose, we loved Come Back to Me because it's one of their biggest songs and they were trying to come back and get their fan. In the end, to me, it speaks to the fact that come back to what you really want to do. You might be tempted to go other paths, but just stay true to yourself.
That certainly, I think, is the core message for me too, the way that you two have articulated it. But just listening to you all talk, I guess, at the root of staying true to yourself and following your dreams is, to be corny for a second myself, just the idea of love, to find the thing you love.
That's not corny.
There's something beyond just the mawkish sentimentality of the idea of love that there is in sort of the mainstream media. I mean, I think loving yourself, loving what you do, and loving the people you do it with it's just another way of saying what you all had said. But I think it's just so important for people to be able to find that. As any of us who have been in a relationship that's based in love for any period of time knows, yes, there are peaks and there are valleys. There are rocky times and there are smooth times. But coming back to that sense of love, I think, is something that can help you get through those moments and keep you focused on what's important. And I think in terms of the stories to tell, like, there's something about film and media that is just such a powerful way to build community. Because sometimes I do get asked sometimes, like, are you just going to work on like Asian stuff? Like, what's up with that? And I'm just like, but that's just the community I know best. And those are the communities that I feel like I can have the most connection to and the most impact on. And I think whatever I do, I just hope that it continues to build that community so that, you know, for my nieces, for my nephews, my daughter, they'll have even less baggage than what's already out there and can just kind of find what they love without having to deal with all the other nonsense.
That's beautiful. And just for what it's worth, Eugene, I've got just as much as you do in terms of like the stuff that we still struggle with in terms of identity and sort of how we see ourselves. So please understand you're not alone for whatever that's worth.
No, it means a lot. It really does.
As someone who is both a consumer and also someone who is in the business as a producer and a director, I hope you continue to champion stories that are powerful and needed. And I don't know, Eugene, your next film could be about like all the Korean guys in LA. Like, what's going on with that?
Man, that's a very large bag to unpack.
Could be like a 10-parter, you know what I mean? But I'm going to ask you to sign us off. So let's go one at a time. Diane, will you let me know who you are and what you represent?
I am Diane Quon, and I produced the Rose film that we're talking about. I would say I'm first and foremost a mother and also a grandmother and a wife. And I am repping my son, Chris. I lost him, and he probably was most interested in film and music and making a difference. And my 3 daughters too, but my son isn't here, and I'd love to be. I love the idea of repping what he would want to do.
That's beautiful, Diane. Eugene.
I am Eugene Yu, and I am the director of the documentary The Rose Come Back. And I'm a Korean guy from LA. And I'm the son of immigrants and the son of a refugee of war. And the father of someone who's part of a generation who I hope can rep, I'm going to put it on her, I hope can rep a generation that starts to sing its song in earnest for the entire world to hear.
And that brings me to the end of this episode. A huge and heartfelt thank you to Diane Quon and Eugene Yi for joining me and for bringing The Rose, Come Back to Me, to audiences. This film, it's so much more than a behind-the-scenes look at a band. It's a moving portrait of what it means to succeed on your own terms by standing behind the things you believe in and with your integrity completely intact. Through their storytelling, Diane and Eugene shine a light on the true power of friendship, the importance of choosing mental health, and the beauty of choosing a path that reflects your truth, even when it means going against the grain. So if this episode moved you, inspired you, or made you think, I'd love your support. Please share this episode with your friends, download it, and leave a review. And don't forget, subscribe to Reppin so you never miss an episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and whatever else you've got on your mind. You can message me on my Instagram page at Reppin_podcast. And don't forget, you can watch this conversation and some others on my YouTube page. So head on over there, subscribe, follow, and that handle for YouTube is Reppin Podcast. Always thank you to Nelson Pinero for being my wingman, the goose to my maverick. Please tell me you know that reference. If not, Google it as I go, weep in a corner. Reppin is a Suburban Outlaw Productions. Until next time, stay true, stay kind, and always stand up. and represent.